Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of your favorite podcast, The Fantasy Birds. We're back. It's week, 11 in fantasy basketball. Rolling into the All-Star break. Got some moves that we need to be making before the All-Star break ends to get you rolling for that second half of the season, get you into those fantasy playoffs to where maybe we can do some damage. All right, heading into the All-Star break, we got some buy low, sell high guys like we've done all year that you need to be going to get or getting off your team in preparation for the fantasy playoffs. First, guys, we're going to start off with Kemba Walker and Jayson Tatum, two Boston Celtics. Two guys we're flippy-floppy on as we're buying or selling. Right here, Kemba Walker, we're selling Kemba Walker. He averages about 18 points a game, actual points a game so far this season. He sits back-to-backs. This is a very important thing in a weekly lineup. If you're only playing 3 out of 4 games, that's going to give your opponent a huge advantage. So Kemba Walker, a bigger name, and not really providing that value that you want to see with that name. So definitely a trade potential there. He's been over his average scoring 18 in the last 4 games. He's actually averaging around 25 points a game. That's an increase of 7 points per game. It's not very sustainable for Kemba Walker with all the guys on that team. Marcus Smart is coming back. We cannot forget that. So Kemba Walker, with his injury history, his sitting back-to-backs, and his scoring being up 7 points a game, Kemba Walker, guy we're looking to sell by the All-Star break. And on the flip side, we got Jayson Tatum with the Boston Celtics. Same team, but different scenario here. He's actually been under his points per game. Probably something to do with Kemba Walker's recent resurgence. Jayson Tatum's around 25 points per game on the season. He's actually been under 15 points per game in 3 of the last 4 games. Everything else has been consistent: rebounds, assists, steals. He's been consistent in that category. It's just really the scoring the last couple of games. So if someone's down on him going into the All-Star break, definitely looking to get Jayson Tatum. Moving on to a different team in the NBA, we got Kevin Durant of the Brooklyn Nets. He's been out with health and safety protocol, hamstring injuries, you name it. He's been out. Kevin Durant, you hate to see such a talented player out for a long period of time, but it's happening. Kevin Durant averaging, depending on your league settings in points leagues, around 45 a game. He gets 30 actual points a game, rebounds, assists. He's the big guy for that team, with DeAndre Jordan really kind of being to the end of his career, not really putting up good stats, not really a good defender anymore other than just a low block. Can't really play pick and roll defense. Kevin Durant's definitely a guy we want to add. People are going to be worried about Kyrie Irving and James Harden taking away, usage and scoring ability, but Kevin Durant's going to get his. He's the best player on that team. There's no denying it. He's a top 5 player in the NBA, and he's going to get his. He's going to get his mid-range shots, and he's going to shoot at a very efficient clip, right around 50% above. So Kevin Durant, he's going to, no matter what, who's got the ball in his hands, James Harden, Kyrie, we expect Kevin Durant to come back after the All-Star break, be dominant, and be a top 10 fantasy basketball player like we expect him to be. So Kevin Durant, someone we are buying heading into the All-Star break. Who sticks out here for you?
Well, I'm going to take a look at these last 3 guys on the list. The first of which, I'm going to start with Kyle Lowry. The first of which is partly because of his recent performance. I'll just talk about his last 3 games. He has played 33 to 35 minutes per night in each of those games. At least 40 fantasy points in all 3 of those recent games, including a 60 fantasy point triple double that he had against the Houston Rockets. All 3 of those performances definitely go above the 35.7 points per night, and it definitely looks good on his recent resume if you're trying to get some good value in a trade here. Also, Kyle Lowry, despite being a very dependable option throughout the beginning of the season, just as a guy that would get you between 35 and 46 points a night, literally every night. I know from experience having him on my team personally, and he was just a very reliable guy night in and night out. Wouldn't miss games. That hasn't really been the case recently. He's had a couple of nagging injuries, forcing him to miss about, if he has 4 games in a week, he'd probably miss about 2 of them. He hadn't exactly been reliable. You don't know exactly whether or not to put him in your lineup. Not to mention, there have been a couple of games recently with the Raptors, one against the Pistons this week where it got pushed back a day. That kind of messed up with the schedule a little bit. That's normal. We're going to see that pretty much with every team in the NBA this year. But I think it just goes to show that, Kyle Lowry hasn't quite been the consistent guy that we have been accustomed to at this point. And I think given his recent performance, you might want to sell while you can, considering that Kyle Lowry also in the playoffs, his schedule is very interesting. He has 5 games one week in the playoffs, but another one of those weeks he only has 2 games. And do you really want to play Kyle Lowry when he only has 2 games in a week? I don't think that's quite enough volume. So you want to take a look at the schedule and see how many games, because that's going to matter soon. Also, Thad Young is on this list. Listen, Thad Young for about a month now has been really productive, and he's been really consistent. He's in the last 5 games that he's played, he's scored at least 33 fantasy points, which goes above his season average of 29.2, which I think is a little bit deceiving. However, you have Otto Porter Jr. coming back. There's been a need for more ball handling and more of that low post facilitator, face up the basket type of role for them in wake of those guys' absences. We're kind of seeing the high point for Thad Young, and it would be a good time to sell. The last guy I'll just mention here real quick is Christian Wood. I think this is quite obvious. He has missed a lot of time due to injury. However, the All-Star break is coming up, and he's going to be back by the time we start playing games after the All-Star break. Christian Wood actually said recently that he feels about 80% now, and if it was, quote, up to him, he would play their next game. So listen, I think Christian Wood, while he's been out, he's going to be healthy coming down the home stretch of the season, coming out of the All-Star break. And listen, if you have someone in your league that's, he's an impatient owner, he wants to make a move, Christian Wood would be this is kind of your last chance to get in on Christian Wood while he's out, while he has that injury label on him. Because listen, us at the Fantasy Birds all season, it's been no secret. Hop on the Christian Wood bandwagon. There's plenty of room. We're taking as many people as are willing to jump on, because Christian Wood is a legitimate fantasy player. He is someone you want in your lineup. So I think now would be your kind of last chance to get him, last call at the club per se.
Oh yeah, we've been on Christian Wood for weeks now. Like you said, last chance to get him. Now we're going to look into some waiver wire pickups. We haven't done waiver wire pickups yet this year, but look, the trade deadline's approaching in fantasy, so we might as well throw a couple names on here. First guy we want to talk about is Dennis Smith Jr., recently traded from the New York Knicks to the Detroit Pistons in that Derrick Rose trade, because, Thibodeau loves his Derrick Rose. But Dennis Smith Jr. playing pretty well for this Detroit Pistons team, only around 27 minutes a game. You'd like to see that a little bit up, but still only rostered around 30% of leagues. And he got a triple-double in the last game, so he's really putting up numbers, assisting and scoring. How sustainable it is, I mean, that's yet to be seen. There's a lot of injuries on this team. Jeremy Grant's been sitting out. Other guys, Killian Hayes, you name it. This team's battered and beaten. But Dennis Smith Jr. has some recent production that, we could see continuing if the injuries are still there after the All-Star break. So some guy we're picking up, keeping an eye on there, Dennis Smith Jr.
Bruce Brown has been playing really well recently for the Brooklyn Nets. And to be honest, I don't know exactly what to make of this in terms of whether this is sustainable going forward. I think a lot of that has to do, obviously, with Kevin Durant being out, and they need someone on that second unit that can kind of handle that can handle the ball. Obviously, Spencer Dinwiddie's been out all season. They need a guard off the bench that can handle the rock, whether Kevin Durant is in or not. However, with Kevin Durant out, this has been a prime opportunity for Bruce Brown to get buckets. He's been playing really well recently. He's only averaging 18.2 points on the season, but he scored at least 31 fantasy points in 4 out of his last 6 games. He's been playing really well. And ultimately, what it comes down to is I don't know whether this is sustainable or not. Ultimately, we're going to have to see what his role in the offense is once Kevin Durant comes back, and how many minutes he get, how he kind of meshes with all of that when he comes back. Is he going to revert back more to the 18.2 points per game he's been averaging on the season, or is he going to stay closer to the numbers that he has been putting up? If he is, then Bruce Brown is definitely somebody that I think, regardless, if you have a spot on the end of your bench, I think he's definitely worth a flyer if he's been producing this well. And if he doesn't put up these types of numbers after Kevin Durant comes back, then you can release him with no penalty. It's fine. but I definitely think the upside is there, and I think it lends itself pretty well to his recent production. Another guy that Hunter and I talked about was Jakob Poetl as well for the Spurs, and we really talked about this in regards to what the Spurs are going to do with LaMarcus Aldridge. Obviously, there's been a report coming out recently that the Spurs are looking to shop, or at least listening to offers for DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge. Obviously, LaMarcus Aldridge getting significant minutes and usage in that front court. However, he has been out recently, and that has proved to be a nice spike in minutes and production for Jakob Poetl. Nothing really insane. He'll get you about 30 points a night. But if you're really desperate, if you need someone to kind of fill in that last spot in the lineup, I think Jakob Poetl could be a nice guy moving forward. And that's the key, because I think the Spurs are in a transition period, and I think they're really going to try and look to move a different direction. I think we can kind of tell that the DeMar DeRozan, LaMarcus Aldridge thing just isn't really working out. It seems like they're trying to trade them. I'm not saying they would hold LaMarcus Aldridge out, kind of like what Cleveland's doing with Andre Drummond. I do think, and I'm sure you could back me up on this, that LaMarcus Aldridge is kind of, I guess you could say, on his way out in San Antonio, and I think they're gonna give more minutes to Poeltl recently, especially since LaMarcus Aldridge just hasn't been very effective recently.
Yeah, LaMarcus Aldridge, if you watch him play for that San Antonio Spurs team, he kind of has the lateral quickness of Peyton Manning at the end of his career. Can't really play any sort of defense other than maybe low post, but pick and roll defense, he gets exposed night in, night out. Really just a mid-range shooting stretch 4 or 5 kind of guy now. And they're kind of phasing him out of the team. He's injured now. Jakob Poetl plays much better defense. So Jakob Poetl, definitely a guy we're looking to get in. Marcus Aldridge, I think his fantasy value, it might be done for his career. But he had a lot of good years, and we appreciate what he's done over the years. But Marcus Aldridge, it's time to move on, buddy. But that's going to wrap it up for us at the Fantasy Birds for Week 11. We had Buy Low. We had Sell High. We had Waiver Wire this week. We appreciate you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next week with Fantasy Birds.